Dr. Siobhan O'Sullivan does like knowing animals. Dr. Siobhan O'Sullivan does like knowing animals.
Hey you guys, welcome to Knowing Animals, the podcast. This episode is from our Protecting Animals series, where we talk to animal advocates, past and present, about the work they do for animals. I'm Siobhan O'Sullivan and I do like knowing animals. Again, this episode we have 3 fantastic sponsors for the podcast. The first are our tried and tested friends over at ASA. ASA is the Australasian Animal Studies Association. That's ASA, the Australasian Animal Studies Association. They're a membership group for academics, artists and animal advocates interested in animal issues. I'm a member of ASA. I joined ASA by simply going to their website and then sending them $50 Australian. It was very painless, and it's wonderful to see my money going to such a good organisation that works very hard to make animal studies scholars aware of opportunities, including conferences, calls for papers, funding opportunities, and which also hosts the biannual ASA conference. So if you're not a member of ASA, please do join. Go to the ASA website and also start following them on Facebook. They put a lot of very interesting and important information up on Facebook. Our second sponsor is again Kibble. That's Kibbl. Now, have you had a look at Kibble either on Facebook or gone to their website or indeed downloaded their app? Kibble is a new app that data mines information from the web about animals looking for their forever home. It can be also used to raise money for animal charities. So if you want to see some very cute furry animals and you're also interested in finding a way to give back to animal charities, I suggest you think about downloading Kibble. Simply go to your Apple Store or Google Play and look for Kibble, Kibbl. Now, our third and final sponsor is Faunary Press. Faunary Press is spelled Faunary, and Faunary Press have just put out a new book called After Kitsia, an anthology of animal fictions. The book is available at Amazon, or you can go to the Faunary Press website. Now, of course, most listeners will know that Kitsia has had a very big impact in the area of animal studies. His literature often discusses very important and complex ethical issues pertaining to animals. So I think this book will be a very important contribution to any university library that is looking to build its collection of animal studies, and of course also just a wonderful read for listeners. So have a think about purchasing a copy of After Kitsia for yourself, and why not also order one for your library. Thank you very much to all our sponsors this episode. It's very much appreciated. Okay, now let's go to the show proper. This episode is coming to you from Brussels, which of course, as you will know, is the centre of European politics and European Parliament. I'm sitting very close to the European Parliament today, and I'm really, really lucky, really privileged to be able to speak to Reineke, how did I go? Hameleers.
Sounds good.
Who is the director of Eurogroup for Animals. So Eurogroup for Animals, of course, we're going to learn a lot more about them in the coming half an hour, but they do a lot of work to advocate on behalf of animals in Europe, including to the European Parliament. But as we're going to see, they have membership organisations from around the world, including at least one from Australia. So welcome to the podcast, Reineke.
Thank you. Thank you, Siobhan. Did I pronounce that well?
Siobhan, you did very well.
Good.
Yes.
I practiced. So it's an honor to speak with you and to do this interview.
Yes,
yeah.
Look, I really appreciate you coming on the show. You know, from Australia, when we think about Europe, we think about it as a place that is leading the way in terms of animal welfare. No doubt you think that there's a lot of work to be done, but from the Australian perspective, we see Europe as the leaders. So why don't you start by telling us what you do at Eurogroup for animals.
Yes, sure. Eurogroup for Animals is the leading pan-European animal advocacy organization, convening 54 members in all the European member states. As you will know, we have 28 member states in Europe. But we also collaborate with organizations in the US, in Norway, in Switzerland, in Serbia, and, as you already said, in Australia, because I was very pleased to welcome the international branch of Animals Australia on board, because we have to look at animal welfare from a global perspective. So Eurogroup brings together all these organizations, and we represent the animals and our members' interest here in Brussels and Strasbourg, the heart of the EU policy making. And our vision is to build a future, to build a Europe that cares for animals. And our primary focus is to improve the lives of as many animals as possible by achieving better legislation, enforcement, standards, but also societal attitudes through a united community of animal protection organizations.
So were you established around the same time as the European Parliament was beginning to convene, or what's the history of the organisation?
Eurogroup for Animals was founded in 1980 because at the time the founders of also the European community felt that it was very important to join forces. Because they didn't want to have all their own offices here. They really felt we need to be represented on animal welfare together. And we need to make sure that animal welfare will be put on the European agenda, because that wasn't the case at the time. And I'm pleased to say that in all these years, 37 years, we have achieved a lot. We have seen the adoption of almost 40 legislative acts that have led to higher welfare or better animal health. And you may remember, you may know of some of them, for example, legislation for animals during transport, during time of killing, the husbandry of pigs, for example. We saw a ban for veal crates. We saw the introduction of group housing for sows. We have seen several pieces of legislation for animals during research, animal experimentation. And all these pieces of legislation culminated in the crucial acknowledgement of animals as sentient beings, which has been enshrined in the Treaty of the European Union. So yes, a lot of positive results have been achieved. But then, of course, you already feel there's a big however.
Yeah, however.
However. Yeah. So this principle of sentience, was of course a historic victory for the animal advocacy movement in Europe, because it's so important. And additionally, the 5 freedoms were included in our general farming directive. So that's really good. But these principles have not been implemented in actual legislation, because to actual legislation, animals are only described as products, as meat and commodities. So in a way, it's a that letter, and we are working very, very hard on that, because this principle in the treaty should also mean something in actual reality in the lives of animals of flesh and blood. And then on top of that, we have seen a stagnation of animal welfare policies. So over the last, let's say, 7 to 8 years, progress on animal welfare legislation has slowed down. And this is really worrying.
Yes, so it's fascinating. You point to 3 important issues that I'd like to talk to you about. The first is the challenge of converting principles into action. And I'm wondering how you then go about making that happen. So it seems to me that the European community, or to the extent that the European community that meets in Brussels, are very progressive in many ways, particularly in relation to animals. So what do you do then? Do you kind of leave the process of talking to people in Brussels and return to individual countries and try to give it meaning in individual countries? Or do you try to give these principles meaning through European law?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And we have 3 sort of core roles we use in our advocacy work. So firstly, we represent the movement here in Brussels. So we take part in a lot of advisory groups, in a lot of platforms. So we really advise the European institutions on our campaigns and on our objectives. Which are focused on 4 key policies: farm animals, research animals, wildlife, and companion animals. And we also invest a lot of efforts in trade, which is a horizontal topic. So we lobby here in Brussels. We talk to a lot of people, and we hold a seat on animal welfare in many advisory bodies, because clearly animal welfare isn't that prominent in these in these advisory meetings. So that's our primary role. But then, of course, we also have to campaign and to proactively influence agendas. And that's why we hold annual flagship campaigns together with our members, because Eurogroup is a federative body. We don't communicate with the general public, but as everything is interlinked, we work through our members to mobilize citizens, to influence national politicians, to mobilize corporates, because we really also have to lead the way by showing that it can be done, and we do that with forward-thinking corporates, for example. So we run campaigns. So last year saw a big campaign, Stop the Trucks, to end long-distance live animal transportation, and this year we are running a key campaign on ending pig pain, and this is looking at ending painful mutilations in pig farming. So that's our second core role in how we advocate for change. And then our third role is that we bring the movement together, because we believe in collaboration. We believe that we can only be successful if we work together and if we align strategies, because otherwise they will play us off against each other. And we need to be very strong on that. Yeah.
And is it hard to bring the animal groups together to get them to agree to which issues to pursue or how to pursue them?
I think that the Eurogroup for Animals family, as I like to put it, is a very cohesive group. And I always love to take part in our working group sessions or other places where our members get together, because they are very important sources of inspiration for us and for our members, because nothing is happening in isolation. So members who are working on issues in Germany are facing the same challenges as members who are working in Spain or in Scotland. So, and that's a really strong aspect of Eurogroup for Animals. But of course there are also very specific interests, and not all of the organizations want to collaborate, but I'm very pleased to see that the majority of the European animal protection movement is very pro collaboration we have a very strong movement, and it's getting stronger every year.
So do you have any thoughts about why the European Parliament has been so receptive to positive change for animals?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I think that the Parliament is really reflecting also the European citizens' views. And we have seen a new Eurobarometer on animal welfare in 2015, which showed an overwhelming support for animal welfare issues. So the vast majority of Europeans want their national governments, but also the European decision makers, to better protect farm animals, to better protect companion animals, to make sure that imported products comply with our standards. And they also express that they would be willing to pay a bit more for higher welfare products. So very positive outcomes. So I think that the Parliament is taking the views of their constituents very seriously, and that they also see it as their responsibility to represent their citizens. And I can really say it's a cross-political, a cross-border topic that can count on the support of many, many members of the European Parliament.
Wonderful. So when you think about everything that's been achieved in Europe and the lives of animals that have been improved, is there something that you think of as your proudest achievement, or something that you think has had a really big impact on the lives of animals in Europe?
I think that several pieces of legislation have had that effect. For example, when I look at the ban of field crates, but also the pigs legislation, which in theory prohibits tail docking. It's still happening, but in theory it should have had that effect. The ban on the imports of seal products, for example, but also the legislation for the slaughtering of animals. So I think, all these pieces of legislation have had a very important impact, but we are not there yet, because enforcement is really, really problematic. As I already said, the majority of piglets, it's still being docked. Their tails are still being docked. And moreover, there are a lot of species who haven't been protected by any legislation. For example, dairy cows, rabbits, fish. There is no legislation in place, and that's really problematic and also inconsistent. So we have seen a report by the European Parliament also really arguing that the European Commission should now look at how the whole range of species across the board will be protected. Right. Yeah.
So that points to what was going to be my next question, but you might want to add something else. Do you have a particular frustration that you want to name, that's something that you'd love to see done, but just so far you've not been able to get traction or interest in the EU?
I think that our key challenge is how to break the stalemate we are facing on legislative progress, because as I said in the beginning of our chat, we are facing a stagnation of animal welfare policies since 7-8 years, and that has not that much to do with animal welfare as such, but has to do with the whole European political climate. So I think that's our biggest frustration and our biggest challenge at the moment. How can we turn that around? Because due to a lot of other influences, developments on European Union has been very much involved with the whole immigration crisis, the economic crisis. We have seen serious challenges around Euroscepticism and still, and this made the European Commission really prioritize its focus. So it's mainly looking at jobs, at growth, and at tackling all these crisis situations. And it has distracted from legislating in fields like the environment, social justice, but also animal welfare. So how can we turn this around? Because it's clear that the European citizens want to see a lot of improvements, and that there are a lot of win-win scenarios also. But yeah, this sort of stalemate is really complicating our agendas. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating because as you speak, when I think about Europe as a place that has got progressive animal welfare laws, perhaps I am thinking about things that happened in the past, as you say, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And perhaps, you're right. I'm trying to bring to mind something that has been made the news in Australia as an EU achievement for animal welfare, and it seems like it has been a while since that's happened. So,
I think I'm happy also to hear that the European Union is being perceived as such.
Right.
But I think that the EU's reputation is at risk if they won't pick up on further advancing EU policies, because existing legislation is often falling short of its objectives because it hasn't been updated and it's not up to speed with the newest scientific knowledge. And then enforcement is really problematic, and also we are still missing key legislation for several species. So this is really a critical moment, and we can only really push for the next commission and the next parliament to change this situation and to make sure that previous promises will be delivered upon. But it's not that nothing is happening. Because we are working on a lot of issues, and what we do is really to find other political hooks, because clearly animal welfare is not a stand-alone issue. We connect it with a lot of other issues which fall within the mandate of the European Commission, and through that we can take, and we do take, important steps for animals. But when I look at, for example, key legislation for farm animals, we need really to introduce dedicated legislation. Yeah,
fascinating. Now, I ask everyone who comes on the program to answer 5 quick questions. Are you ready for your 5 quick questions?
Yes.
So can you recall when you first started to think that there was something wrong or problematic about the human-non-human animal relationship?
Yeah. I think that was when I was a young girl, and I helped out at a local farm during the weekend and holidays. And I remember that I sat next to a calf in a veal crate. At the time, they weren't prohibited, and that calf licked my hand, and I thought, oh, this is so wrong. This is really, this can't be true. And that really made me realize, I want to dedicate my life to animal advocacy. That was my first experience. Yeah.
Well, that leads nicely into the second question, which is, can you recall the first thing you did to try to bring about change for animals?
It was at that same farm where I helped out, and together with other friends, we did a lot of chores. So we walked the dogs, and we did a lot of things to make sure that, for example, the kittens that were born weren't drowned. We convinced the farmer to keep the calf with the mom, to no avail, of course. But as a student, I became involved in animal campaigning. So that was only at that time that I became politically active, and that I also became a volunteer of the local animal welfare branch in where I studied. These activities at that farm were at the basis. Yeah.
Interesting. So if you had to name one animal advocate who's had a big impact on you, who would it be?
That's a tricky question. I can't name one. When I was studying, I read, for example, Peter Singer's and Tom Regan's books, which really inspired me. And nowadays, I must say that my members really inspire me because, of course, I have the pleasure to be surrounded by many animal activists. But I'm also reading very different books from scholars like Kim Stolwood, Bernard Rollin, but I also like to read Gary Francione and Robert Garner. So I read a whole mix of things to really inspire me and to keep me also fresh and keep evolve my thinking. Yeah.
Wonderful. You must be busy. That's quite a impressive reading list. So what's the most important thing animal advocates can do for animals?
I would say cooperate. Work together. I think that's really one of the crucial things animal advocates can do, and work at political level. Because I can totally see it's not an easy call, and that it requires long-term investments. But if we really want to better protect animals, we need to work politically and to invest in better legislation and in strong enforcement.
Wonderful. So if you had the power to change one thing about the human-non-human animal relationship, what would it be?
It would be for humans to significantly reduce meat consumption and no longer see animals as meat. When I look at the largest number of animals involved who suffer the most, that's definitely in industrial farming. And we will only be able to change that if people get to eat less meat and eating animals. Not an easy call, and we do also invest in gradual improvements of farming practices, and I also believe in that. But in the end, we should really, reduce meat consumption.
So, what are you working on next?
We have a very busy program this year, but our key priorities are still live exports and animal transportation. We will see the final event of our transport campaign next week, and ending pig pain, this year's flagship campaign. We still have some time to go to collect 1 million signatures as to convince the politicians and decision makers here that we should stop castrating piglets and docking their tails. And in the end, we really also want to see a different pig farming system.
So where can people go to find out more about your work?
Definitely on our website. It's www.eurogroupforanimals.org. You can find everything about all the policies we are working on, our latest campaigns, latest news updates. And through our website, you can also subscribe yourself to our magazine, our quarterly magazine.
Wonderful.
So please go there.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
for Knowing
you,
Animals. And thank you to the listeners for joining us for Knowing Animals, a podcast where we talk to animal studies scholars and animal advocates about the work they do for animals. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at knowing_animals, or you can follow me at so_s. Also, you can like us on Facebook at Knowing Animals. And as I say all the time, but alas, some people ignore me, please do leave a review on iTunes. Reviews make it easier for other people to find us. I'm Siobhan O'Sullivan, and I do like knowing animals.